Welcome to the Finding Financial Freedom podcast with the Frugal Physician, where Dr. Disha Spath will be your companion on this exciting financial adventure. Get ready to conquer debt, build wealth, and embrace a mindful spending lifestyle that will empower you to live life on your own terms.
Welcome to another episode of Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. I'm your host, Dr. Disha Spath, and I'm excited to be here today with a very special guest, someone who's been through the ups and downs of managing physician finances and lessons learned along the way. Joining me today is Dr. Rikki Racela. Rikki is a neurologist based in Englewood, New Jersey. He majored in molecular biology at Princeton University and completed medical school at Rutgers in 2007. Now, while his medical career has been a tremendous success, like many of us, he wasn't as prepared for the financial world when he first started out, especially during the early part of his marriage to his anesthesiologist wife. Rikki has openly shared how he made plenty of financial mistakes, included being guided into a whole life insurance policy by a friend who also happened to be a Northwestern Mutual financial advisor. But here's where it gets inspiring. Rikki started diving into financial literacy, and soon enough, Rikki turned things around. Today, he teaches attendings, residents, and med students how to avoid financial predators and make smarter financial choices. He also writes as a columnist for the White Coat Investor, sharing his journey to help others avoid the same mistakes. Rikki, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you so much, Disha. And I don't know if I'm special. You're special. I love the work you do and increasing physician financial literacy. And I'm so honored to be here.
Rikki, thank you so much. I've really appreciated your support all throughout these years, and I'm super excited to talk to you about this today. First, please fill us in on what your journey was like, where you were when you realized that you needed to up your financial literacy game.
It was in a point of pain. I mentioned before we were talking here, there were a few things that was really killing our lifestyle here as doctors. I mentioned my wife having to miss out as an anesthesiologist. She was doing an epidural when my son, at the time he was 3 years old, they have this thing called the little gym. I don't know if it's just a New Jersey thing, but basically they have kids do like little gymnastics things for toddlers. They have a little special Olympics at the end of a few weeks. And my wife had to miss it because she's on call. So I remember her telling me when she got home 24 hours later after this event, I sent her a picture of Jackson getting a little medal. She said she cried. And I told you this at the time. We didn't really necessarily think this was due to financial illiteracy because we thought we were financially good. We were working with Northwestern Mutual, my buddy, financial advisor. So we thought we had the finance things going on. This is just the nature of our job. As physicians, we chose to give up these sorts of things. But then when we looked into it, I was like, well, can't Meredith just take a job that doesn't take as much call? Yes, but you would have to take a pay cut. We were actually in $31,000 of credit card debt at that time. So when I was thinking, it's like, oh, there's no way Meredith can cut down. We're $31,000 credit card debt. But then, like, why are we in $31,000 of credit card debt? So we looked at what we were doing with our Northwestern Mutual financial advisor. And he kept saying that, oh, you gave into lifestyle inflation. So you have to cut down your lifestyle. Then Meredith can cut down and then spend more time with the family. And it just wasn't right. So we looked at Jim Dolly, the White Coat Investor. So my wife actually picked that book up. And when I read it, oh my God, it just opened my eyes to how we were getting screwed by my high school buddy, a guy I had played Little League with. We played football together. Dude, we were in the Central Jersey Group 4 state championship together. We played at Giant Stadium. Why would he do that to me? He was a CFP too. He didn't really sell those products to me as a CFP, but we continued to fund a whole life insurance policy, variable annuities within IRA, things that Jim Dolly and the White Coat Investor was like, this is not right. And that's when we realized and opened like, oh my God, we got screwed by Northwestern Mutual, even though he's a CFP.
Wow. So I found that very similar to my story when you talked about your wife having the moment of epiphany when she's missing out on a valuable experience with your child and she's working and you're thinking about how can we better structure our lives so we can minimize these and maximize the things we value, right? Obviously, we value working, we value our jobs and helping people, but it is traditionally incredibly hard to achieve that balance and almost impossible to do without financial wellness, without financial literacy, which is why I do what I do here and you do what you do there at White Coat Investor. I want to get a little bit more insight into where you came from. Like, tell us the story of how you were raised money wise. What were the money lessons you were taught? And how did you end up with a financial advisor that ended up giving you bad advice?
Well, I guess this is something where I don't want to stereotype, but because I'm Asian, I'm Filipino. There was a thing where you don't need to be financially literate. You just need to become a doctor. I guess it's not just Filipinos, like, every sort of Asian culture. Disha, you might have been told the same thing, right? Like
Absolutely.
it's the stereotype comes from somewhere. You become a lawyer or a doctor.
Yeah, you're going to be
Yeah.
set. I even
Yeah.
wanted to start a Roth IRA in college, and my parents talked me out of it. They were like, no, just save, take out the student loan, stop worrying about money, and you'll be
Because you're gonna become
fine
a
as a
doctor.
doctor.
So to that end, my parents, God bless them, I love them, but that was the main sort of teaching. And it did
Yeah.
inspire me to work hard. So I actually got paid for grades as long as, I got an A on the test. Hey, they'd buy me like that latest Nintendo game. So, I mean, it worked to help me do well in school, which was probably their point. But it did not really teach me financial literacy, right? It just reinforced that as long as I work hard, and then when I become a doctor, that's it. I'll just be rewarded. As if like my parents almost painted the picture like I could just rub up my MD degree against an ATM machine and it'll just start spouting off like, $100 bills. Like really, that was sort of the impression. Like I said, it's almost like an Asian culture thing, like a doctor in America,
What?
millions, still drive Ferraris, like, right? Like it's something where I'm being a little facetious, but that is the main sort of thought that I had in my mind growing up. And then, my parents had the same thought too.
Were your
Um,
parents immigrants?
they're from the Philippines, yeah.
Are they
So
first generation? Are you first generation?
yeah, so I was born here in New Jersey. They moved over right after college, so they're well educated. They actually went to college in the Philippines. My dad's a chemical engineer, my mom's a chemist. Unfortunately, just like a lot of other countries, there's no jobs for being highly educated. So you come here to the United States. So they came here, better life with degrees, chemical engineering, chemistry, trying to live that American dream. So my parents also, because of that immigrant mentality, they were also very frugal too. So they at least had that instilled in me as well. But outside of being frugal and then, work hard to make money, there was no real discussion about our finances, budgeting, things like that many years
Yeah.
later.
How did you get into $31,000 of credit card debt that you mentioned?
Because the whole life policies were $28,000 a year.
More than $2,000 a month?
Yep, exactly. So
Well,
my CFP Northwestern Mutual buddy, yeah, keep funding it. And he blamed lifestyle inflation, which actually, even though I'm frugal, my wife is not the, she's under the mentality, we work so hard, we're doctors, we can spend. So we bought the doctor house. We paid a 1.26 mil for our house, but we thought that we could really afford these things because we were two doctor income and we were being guided by Northwestern Mutual, who said they would help us meet our retirement goals. What's funny is that, yes, it actually pretty true when my buddy said, hey, you did give into lifestyle inflation. So it did contribute, but the whole life policy didn't really help. Like I said, so that was at $28,000 a year of premiums. So trying to fund this, and that actually, it didn't hit us immediately when we bought the house. So we bought the house. We also had my son Jackson. We were doing okay. It's when Mia was born, my second child, and we weren't really budgeting. That's when our expenses like, oh my God, we're not paying off the credit cards in full. That was what broke the camel's back.
mine was the same. It was my second, not the first that caused the financial awakening. It was the second when I realized that we needed to change
Right.
some things.
Right. Because yeah, it's now your budget is way over. And yeah, so I just
Yeah.
dip into the credit cards that sort of paid off and then something's not right.
So tell me, for people that might not know or have listened to our first few episodes, if you haven't, please go back and listen to the first few episodes where we talk about insurance needs and why whole life is a bad deal. But tell me, Rikki, what was the pitch for the whole life to you, and why did you decide it was a bad deal for you?
So the way Northwestern Mutual sells it, it'll help you attain your financial goals, any goal, actually. So you could use it for retirement. You could use it to maybe buy a house, even. You could draw from the cash value or borrow from the cash value. If another purchase, like, oh, your child's wedding, you could either take out the cash value or borrow against it. And they say, oh, it's when you borrow against it, it's tax free. When you invest anywhere else, you're going to pay taxes, right? This is tax free. They don't mention that it's not interest free, right? But that's how they pitch it to you. So what ends up happening is when they sell it, they don't lie to you. You could use it to fund maybe college. You can borrow against it tax free, but they don't mention, oh, it's not interest free. Like, oh, that you're going to be actually negative within the first like 10 to 15 years of the policy in terms of return. They don't mention those things. And I remember my buddy saying, like, when he sold the whole life policy, oh, in the event that you die, anytime, what's the best gift you can give in such a terrible time? You can give your wife and family, like, $1 million, right? It was $1 million policy. They don't mention that you're not going to need that insurance when you're 75 or 80. You hope your kid don't need $1 million. Like, they should be already working and not dependent on your income. So these things I didn't realize. I just really blindly went with what Northwestern Mutual recommended, what my buddy was recommending. And I used that excuse, like, that's why I hired him. I'm too busy. This was a time when I was just trying to learn my craft as a neurologist. So I was basically just reading neurology and just sort of signing on the dotted line, whatever Northwestern Mutual recommended, I did.
That's so sad because $1 million isn't even enough for a young physician who just bought a $1.2 million house to pass on to their kids.
About that. So my buddy recognized that. So we bought Northwestern Mutual term to 80 insurance. So there was another 3 million in term to 80, which they had said, this is the best for you. And it's convertible to whole life. So you can convert to more whole life. So it turns out I made up my other insurance needs with very expensive term policies that had riders to convert to whole life, which made them more expensive. So it was not locked to when I would actually need the insurance. It was term to 80 and convertible to whole life.
How much do you think your friend made on those policies that he sold you?
Both me and my wife combined, anywhere from 28,000 to 40,000. There's a trail too, right? Of maybe 1,000 or two like afterwards. And your previous guest, Becky, had mentioned this too. Northwestern Mutual muddies the waters in how they pay. My buddy was like, oh, I get paid a salary. The insurance company pays me. I don't make a commission. So Northwestern Mutual will muddy the waters. We're like, that's probably true. But I bet your salary will go down if you don't sell enough whole life policies, right? Like just because now they get paid indirectly from that whole life sale, they can formally say and legally say, I don't get a commission when they do. And it's disclosed in the paperwork too, right? Yeah, right. Fully. It's spelled out. It's kind of ridiculous. But those are the sales tactics that get doctors to get screwed.
So this is a perfect segue into why I wanted to have you on the podcast today to talk about how to vet a financial advisor and talk about the different ways they get paid, the different terminology that's used. Everyone's fee something, fee-based, fee only, flat fee. It all sounds kind of similar, but it's all vastly different. So can you talk about the different payment models that financial planners use and what you wish you had known back then?
So I would actually ask and have my potential advisor sign that I have to act as a fiduciary all the time. I know you know Paul Merriman. So Paul works for these guys also, like he sometimes has on his podcast, that have a podcast called Talking Real Money. On their website, their financial advising is Appella, I think, but they have on their website a sort of fiduciary contract. I would have actually used that to have my buddy or potential financial advisor sign that I have to act as a fiduciary all the time.
What does being a fiduciary mean?
That you would do things to sell in the best interest of the client, not to you. You don't make a commission. You don't benefit from selling products. It's something you have the client's best interest and not yours at all times.
So it's kind of like the Hippocratic Oath, where our oath is first do no harm, but also act in the best interests of our patient.
Right, exactly. So unlike an MD or DO, this is incredibly hard to enforce. There'll be advisors that are dual registered, where they have not only the CFP designation, but they also have their series licenses where they could sell products and make a commission. And so what ends up happening is you can act as a suitability standard where you can sell products 1 second and then change hats and offer fiduciary advice the next. So it's something that I think is very important.
So I wrote an article on the Frugal Physician called How to Choose a Financial Advisor. And if you guys are interested in learning about just the basics of how this happens, please reference that article. But the overall, there are different types of advisors and how they structure their fees, right? The first one is the fee only advisor. The fee only advisors, they're fee only, fee based, or commission based. Most people do not call themselves commission based broker dealers, which are basically the people that are there to sell you products. They're going to make a commission depending, and it might not be in your own interest. It might be in the company's interest. That's what the suitability standard means, that they can act in their company's interest. Yes, they are your advisor, but in the end, they are employed by their company and will act in their company's interest as well. And then you have the fiduciary standard, which is they will act in your interest at all times. So we need to know how their company is structured, their fees are structured. So fee only advisors are supposed to act in your own interest. They charge either a flat fee or they could charge you an AUM, a percentage of your assets, which is generally not a good deal. They should not be earning any commissions. To call themselves fee only, they should not earn any commissions selling products, right? Fee based advisors, on the other hand, fee based, not fee only, fee based are kind of the combination that we're talking about here. They could have a fiduciary standard based on one of their degrees, like the CFP, but they also have a broker dealer type getting commissions for the products they're selling. And in that role, they might be acting under the suitability standard, right? And they can switch kind of back and forth at their own discretion. That's the problem with fee based practices. And while I think most of these people that are working for these companies, whether it's Northwestern Mutual or some other company, especially the young people that I've met that are super enthused about finance, about personal finance, they don't realize the conflict of interest there in themselves. I think they don't exactly know what's in the contract that's going out to their potential clients. And I think that's why it's incredibly important to read every contract that you sign, but especially these financial advisor contracts, because they have to, by FINRA and SEC regulations, put in there if they have a suitability clause in any of the roles that they're doing, they have to put in there certain language, which I've listed on the site. It says they have to put in there, your account is a brokerage account, not an advisory account. Our interests may not always be the same as yours. Please ask us questions to make sure you understand your rights and our obligations to you, including the extent of our obligations to disclose conflict of interest and act in your best interest. We are paid both by you and sometimes by the people who compensate us based on what you buy. Therefore, our profits and our salesperson's compensation may vary by product and over time. So that's really great language, right? And if that clause is in there, that means that they at some point can act on the suitability standard, which may not be in your best interest.
Absolutely, DJ. Yeah. And that was a great summary of these sort of payment structures. But even if you're not fee based where you make money off product, you could still be fiduciary and be in assets under management where you could have just, oh, how much money as a fiduciary advisor managing, but there's
Right.
still a conflict and it doesn't violate the CFP standard. You would be incentivized to want to, okay, don't pay off your student loans. Let's
Right.
invest, right? So, and even that is still fiduciary, right? You're still investing, right?
Yeah, you
But
could theoretically have a better return investing than paying off
right,
your debt.
yeah. Theoretically, but you might be saying that because you also have that conflict of interest. You're going to get paid more having more assets under management. So with my Northwest Mutual advisor, from my old job as a resident, I had actually invested in their 401k during my residency. But then my buddy said, let's transfer it to a Northwestern Mutual rollover IRA
Mm.
because there was also an assets under management fee that he was collecting. And then bought a Northwestern Mutual variable annuity within it, which is just stupid because it's a tax deferred product within a tax deferred vehicle. Anyway, the thing was now it's assets under management for him. So he made more money, even though like that's something where you might have used that money to just transfer to my current work 401k, right? And then I would have been able to the backdoor Roth. But because of that assets under management conflict, put in an IRA that he can manage. So
Sure,
even
more
if you're
money.
not commission based, you could still have that conflict as a fiduciary, but you're paid assets under management. So it's still got
Hmm.
to be careful. And then you
Yeah.
can go fee only, like an hourly model. Well, the conflict there is like, well, yeah, I'm just going to talk, right? So there is that conflict. You may want to cut your fiduciary advisor short if it's an hourly model. So there's always conflicts there. And then if you're just like, oh, you get paid for a plan, well, that advisor may just make that plan, draw it up in 10 minutes, right? So there's just no absolute, totally fiduciary. There's always going to be a conflict. I think it's important when you choose an advisor just to recognize what that might be, whether it's a UM model and they want to have you not pay off debt and they just might be incentivized to manage more money, or if it's fee for a plan, you want to make sure they put enough effort and time into drawing up that plan, or hourly, you just don't want them to be on the Zoom call for like 4 or 5 hours talking about their day, right? So just recognizing how an advisor gets paid, very
Yeah.
important to notice what their conflicts might be.
I also want to mention a couple of other terms that get thrown around. Flat fee, right? Flat fee advising. What is that? Well, a flat fee advice is basically I'm going to charge you a flat fee, but it can be under the umbrella of a fee based practice or a fee only practice. So
Mhm.
again, muddying the waters even more, right? But that flat fee basically means you're paying a flat fee for that financial plan. But then if they're fee based, they can still sell you products for a commission. And
Mhm.
that may not be in your interest. Whereas if they're fee only, then they have to not get commissions on products they're selling by the rules. So, yeah. And then there's also advice only financial planning, right? Sarah Catherine does that, which is taking flat fee to the next level and not basically just giving advice about how to manage, but they are involved in helping you stay motivated to implement your plan. But it's up to you to implement your plan. And then you mentioned this very important caveat that AUM, even if they're RIAs, we didn't talk about RIAs versus broker dealers, right? But
Mhm.
registered investment advisors have to act under a fiduciary role. And often they are structured as an AUM, fee only practice. But then, even if they are a fee only, they are incentivized to get your assets into vehicles they can manage because they actually don't manage the funds in your 401k. They might give you advice on what to invest in it, but yeah, they don't manage your 401k and they don't have access to that money. They're not making AUM off of that, right? They're not
Mhm.
getting their fees off of your 401k. So they're incentivized to move it to a location where they can get those fees.
Mhm.
And those fees can really add up. I mean, in the beginning of your career, it may not seem so bad. If you're only giving them $500,000 and then they're charging you $5,000 a year, that's not bad. But if you get to $5 million, now you're paying a ludicrous amount of money if you're getting charged 1%, which is pretty standard, 0.5, 2%. 2% AUM are thankfully slowly dying down, but you'll still find some people paying that much. I mean, it's really, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to an advisor that's not even managing your 401k.
Yeah,
What?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So if you recognize that, though, there is a benefit where, like, oh, if I'm a resident, I want a financial advisor. Actually, AUM would be a fiduciary AUM because you just don't have a lot of assets to manage. So, yeah, if you recognize this, you could sort of like, oh, okay, I'm not going to be paying that advisor much. I don't have much. Or later on, as you gain more assets, you may want to say, okay, I can't use an AUM free type of advisor. Maybe more flat fee would be reasonable. It's important to recognize that, oh, yeah, how much you'll actually be paying will definitely depend on if you're AUM, flat fee. So,
Exactly. So yeah, and you then bring up a really good point. That's very important to know what your needs are and know how these things are structured. Not be afraid to get advice, if you want it. If you recognize that you need to outsource this, I just don't have enough hours in the day to do this myself or learn how to do it well, then in order to vet the advisors, which I talk to a lot of financial advisors because I do what I do here and I try to vet them as thoroughly as possible for you guys. So I'm not recommending someone that might screw you over. So, what are some questions we can ask? So, let's say I'm a financial advisor. I'm telling you, I'm going to act in your best interest. I want to help you turn your financial situation around. Give me all your money so I can manage it. And, I'm going to help you get the right insurances in place and all such. What questions would you ask me?
Are you required to act as a fiduciary all the time? I didn't think you'd have to mention all the time, but you do have to mention all the time. That would be the number one question. And I would have that like
Ask
signed.
that directly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, yes. Then if you have that signed, yes, that would be the number one question. And then so after that, you sort of mentioned, how do you get paid? And again, even though you could be acting as a fiduciary all the time, you might be incentivized as an AUM and get more assets under management, right? Because that conflict is there. There's no way to totally get rid of that. And you'd still be acting as a fiduciary. You're just incentivized, right? So that would be sort of the second question. And then also a third would be the actual sort of other clients that I might talk to or whatever. So I have like other people who vetted. Also, if they say, oh, I advertise with Dr. Spath on their website or the white coat investor, I mean, that's being vetted right there. So that would probably be the third thing. What other clients have you worked with? Do you advertise like in any of the sort of physician finance websites? Because that's something where you, Disha, as well as, Jim Dolly at the White Coat Investor, Jimmy Turner, have already done a lot of the vetting. So if there were sort of three questions I would focus on, that number one, are you required to act as a fiduciary all the time? Can you sign here to vet that? How do you get paid? And then also, who have you worked with? Like, who have you advertised in the sort of the physician finance space?
I agree with all those. I do my best to vet everyone, but I will say, for full disclosure, me, White Coat Investor, Jimmy Turner, who actually sells insurance now. Again, we have a podcast or a blog platform where we depend on advertisers to help us bring free content to you, right? So we are biased in that way because we need their advertiser money. And also, as much as we try to vet these people and get you the best deal, I usually get the contract that they send their clients, like a generic contract that they send their clients so I can read through it. But that contract might be modified by the time it gets to you. That's just a generic contract, right? So I can't guarantee that your contract contains what I saw like a year ago. So it's still very, very important for you to read that contract and make sure you know all the things you need to vet for. Even though they advertise with me or another finance influencer, that doesn't make it infallible. And I
Mhm.
hate to say that because I want to be that trustworthy voice for you, which I hope I am. I try my best. But at the same time, I know Jim tries his best, but at the same time, we don't own these companies. We're not on the back end, right? So it's important to disclose that we know as much as they tell us, right? And then we do have our conflicts of interest as well. So you have to make sure you keep that in mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's important to just be a knowledgeable buyer. You're paying for financial advice. Make sure you're doing your research and figuring out if it's the best fit for you. On the website and on the frugalphysician.com, I have links to FINRA and to the SEC's investment advisor public disclosure website and FINRA's broker check. This is the official documentation that the government has on people that are registered to give financial advice. Make sure you check that out before you go out to meet with a financial planner, financial advisor. Check to see if they're listed as an RIA or if they're listed as a broker dealer. RIAs are held to a more strict fiduciary standard, and broker dealers are not. They're held to the suitability standards. So make sure you look at that. Sometimes they're dual registered. And then you'd really have to, when you go into that meeting, be like, okay, so why is it that you're dual registered? And tell me about your series licenses and tell me about exactly what you will advise me on. And if you're acting in my best interest all the time. And on the site, I also have some useful comparison tools and checklists from the National Association of Personal Finance Advisors that you can go and take it with you. And we don't want to be that person, right? I always feel a little awkward being like super, yeah, fine. That's what you're telling me, but write it down. Like, tell me exactly, what are these things? How are you getting paid? But these checklists will guide you through it so you don't feel as awkward going through it. And then you know the right questions to ask.
Adisha, that's brilliant. Yeah. I remember when my buddy, I looked at his form ADV, right? I had no checklist to see like, oh, he has a series selling license. Is that normal? It was hard for me just looking at the form ADV to actually see what I was actually looking at.
We haven't covered that yet. Tell me what a Form ADV is.
Oh, that's the disclosure form that you're required as a financial professional to post publicly. It's like this SEC regulation, right? So it's supposed to eliminate these conflicts of interest, or at least you know who the person you're getting. But it doesn't say like, oh, this person's a fiduciary or not. It just says like, oh, they have their series licenses, their FINRA. So when I looked at my buddy, it's like, oh, he's FINRA. That must mean he like is a good guy, right? Passed his FINRA. And all it means is like he could sell me product. He could screw me. Like, actually, it's better that you're not FINRA regulated. So that means you can't sell me product, right? I did not know this when looking at his Form ADV a decade ago, and it screwed me in the end. And this is the SEC's sort of response to help us out. So it's good you provide a checklist to actually see what they can do, what they're licensed under, because FINRA means you could sell product. RIA, you mentioned, it'll be there on the Form ADV. That's more of sort of trying to keep up with a fiduciary standard. That's great that you have that sort of checklist, because the ADV might as well just be in Greek.
And it's like our regulatory boards. If you look me up on the internal medicine board or the state board, you'll only basically see the really terrible things. Thank goodness don't have anything there. But, you'll see the major lawsuits that have happened. Northwestern Mutual has quite a few. And the details of those lawsuits are listed. The details of those complaints are there. So you can see if there have been any regulatory action against your financial advisor. That's kind of the basic of, vetting someone is if you see a bunch of regulatory infractions, then you might
Yeah.
want to turn away. Can you fire them?
Yes. Absolutely. So luckily with my buddy, I think like to consider we're still friends. I just avoided the conversation of firing. That was easy. It might be different for a different company. So Northwestern Mutual is a very big company. I just called the general number and said, I just want to get rid of my whole life policy. Can we just liquidate the variable annuity within the IRA? I just went to the general number to do this. My buddy probably got the hint, but luckily, at least this is the way where it works for Northwestern Mutual Advisor. This is probably not the first time this has happened, right? So they do have a 1035 exchange unit to get out of the whole life policy. They have an entire unit to get out of whole life policies, but it's something I think they have to follow the law, right? I did not have to talk to my buddy to fire him formally. I just got out of the Northwestern Mutual products, just calling the general number. I actually said, do I have to talk with my buddy that would be uncomfortable? The Northwestern Mutual woman on the phone said, no, you don't have to. You will be notified that you are selling these products, but you don't have to talk to him. So it's something where you can avoid that, at least if you're working with an insurance company like Northwestern Mutual, or you can avoid that conversation. But yes, you could fire them at any time. There's nothing where you're married to this person. It is something where it might be difficult if it's a friend or something like that, like in my situation.
So what was your fee setup for the financial advice with your friend?
So it was, oh, the insurance company pays me, right? That's when I asked him, how do you get paid? He's like, oh, don't worry. Like the insurance company pays me. So again, he did not have to disclose that Northwestern Mutual probably makes him have a quota of selling, or else his salary will go down. So it was probably proportional to how much product he sold. Also, there was an AUM fee as well, which was 1%. And that's why my retirement account from residency, he put it in the Northwestern Mutual rollover IRA, because now the IRA is something you can manage. It's not under your work retirement account, right? It's a retirement account that's now managed by him. So there was that too. There wasn't much money left over to put in a brokerage account, but I had a few $100s in a Northwestern Mutual brokerage account. So that would go under the AUM fee as well.
What did you do with those assets when you broke up with him?
With the Northwestern Mutual IRA, there was a Northwestern Mutual variable annuity. So to transfer it to my work 401k so that I could do the backdoor Roth, I had to liquidate the variable annuity. You can't just transfer it to my retirement account at work, right? So I sold the variable annuity. I don't even want to know how much the fee was to get out of it. It was sold, it was in cash. Now it could transfer over to my work 401k. And now I could do the backdoor Roth. I wouldn't be held by the pro rata rule. So the whole life insurance policy, I did what's called a 1035 exchange. So for both me and my wife, we had $130,000 of cash value in our policies, but had paid $180,000 in premiums. So we had a $50,000 loss on whole life. And so when you transfer it to a low cost variable annuity, what ends up happening is you can invest in the low cost variable annuity in the index fund. It went to Fidelity because they had a low cost variable annuity. I invested in a low cost index fund, just a total stock market index fund, and just waited until it grew up to cost basis. And then I nixed the Fidelity variable annuity. So what ends up happening is you made up that $50,000 loss tax free. So the insurance policies also, I made sure that I got appropriate term life insurance before doing that. I worked with Bob Biani and Stephanie Pearson, right? Before I did that with the life insurance policies, I just made sure I had appropriate term in place and then did that because I depended on the death benefit.
Before we move on, we didn't cover what a variable annuity is. Can you just quickly summarize what that is?
So it's an annuity. My buddy sold it to me. It's like, yeah, no companies have pensions anymore, right? But you can buy a pension. So basically, annuity is something where if you turn it on, like at some time down the road, it will pay you a sort of salary, almost like a pension.
Mhm.
So that's basically what an annuity is. When you say variable annuity, it's because you can invest in various things like index funds or actively managed funds within the annuity. So they sell it to you like it's an annuity, but a variable annuity, you can invest in the stock market. You can invest in all these funds. It'll grow like a huge amount, but you still have the guarantee of the annuity. So there's no downside, right? So they sort of sell it to you like you have a lot of the upside of it, of a pension that, there's no pensions anymore. You can buy one and you have little downside and still participate in the growth of the stock market or stocks. But unfortunately, within this annuity, you pay for that as well as every sort of fund that was in the Northwestern Mutual variable annuity was actively managed. So
Mm.
I remember when I got financially literate, oh my God, the cheapest fund that was under there was like 12 funds. The cheapest one was 87 bips, which is expensive, right? So where the total stock market is like 3 bips. And the highest one was like 1.57%, like 157. Northwestern Mutual screwed me well. I mean, it could be any company, but it was pretty good. It's something where you don't need to ever invest in a variable annuity. It's a product, just like whole life insurance, it's made to be sold, not bought.
Yes, especially not to a young attending just starting out. You have so much time for compound growth. You don't need a guarantee return yet.
So it's very painful what I could have done with this money. Like me and Meredith, my wife, we would have been debt free by now, right? Or forget paying off debt. We could have just blown it. We could have just done more vacations, like spend more time, My wife wouldn't have been on call and could have actually attended the little gym Olympics. Like really, it's something where the painful thing is thinking the time that Northwestern Mutual financial advising took away from us, from our spending time with us and our family. And like, I don't think as an attending doc, it's not just the money, it's the time away from your kids and family that really is what Northwestern Mutual is taking away from you. Everybody says like Vicki Robbins, right? Your money or your life, right? So I love the concept how like time is tied to like energy, like life energy, right? When I was reading that book, like everybody loves it, but because I got screwed by Northwestern Mutual, it's like, oh my God, they took so much life energy from me, according to Vicki Robbins, right? It's like, that's the most painful thing. Like, I just can't think of how many things my wife and I missed out on, or the funding I could have put into my 529. Instead, it went to funding a whole life policy. Like, we would have had much more in a 529. This was also great too. So Northwestern Mutual, they'd also do 529s as well. They recommend advisor-led 529s. I think it was like 3% assets under management, something. It's the Virginia plan, and they choose that one because it has the most sort of fees on it. But luckily, when I got out of the Virginia 529, if you DIY it, it actually tends to be one of the cheapest, even undercuts Utah. That also was another part of the Northwest Mutual financial advising was very expensive advisor-led 529 plans.
That's crazy. Yeah, there's no reason to pay for assets under management for a 529. If you guys want to go and there's a 529 article on the Frugal Physician, in there are links to the College Board sites where you can compare the different plans and upsides and downsides for all of them, what might work best for you. So make sure you check that article out.
Yeah. So unfortunately, though, like this was at a time when I don't even think Jim Doll, maybe he started the White Coat Investor like the same year I bought the whole life policy.
Oh
Unfortunately,
my God.
this
Yeah.
information was not out at the time. I'm glad you're around now. Hopefully, everybody that's listening never makes the mistakes that I've made.
No, and you too. I mean, you're doing great work with all of the writing that you're doing. We've all made mistakes and it happens, but you were able to recognize them, turn your life around financially. Tell us where you are now financially and how you've been able to make your life better.
Actually, we are doing very well. And I challenge people not to think about this finance stuff as like, oh, pure numbers. My wife, now because we're not paying $28,000 in whole life insurance premiums and actually we're financially literate, she took a no call, no holidays, no weekend position now.
Wow.
So she took 100K pay cut, but because we're financially literate, we can do that. So she's working less, spending more time with the kids. So she's off, right? It's a holiday. She was yelling at Jackson because he was hitting Mia because they were fighting over some candy because we just got ghosted candy at our front door. She is, maybe I should have just taken call and it's so much harder with the kids. It was just yelling, just like a couple hours ago. But yes, she is spending more time with our kids. We are taking more vacations. Actually, believe it or not, we are spending more money. We spend more money now because we don't have Northwestern Mutual Financial Advising, and we're definitely saving more money. Our net worth has reached 3 mil. And when we got financially literate, it was 300K.
Wow.
It's incredible how well we're doing. And this is really just from the advice that you're giving. Also, like, Jim Dolly, White Cone Investors. So, Disha, me and my wife, thank you for what you do. Yeah, I've already did that with Jim Dolly too. Oh my God. And my wife, she hates this personal finance stuff. She hates that I talk about it all the time, but she tolerates it because our lifestyle is so much better now and our careers, we're so much happier for it.
Well, you guys are an inspiration. Thank you so much for taking the time to come on here and share your journey. It's so inspiring to hear how well you've been able to turn things around and achieve more balance and really put these financial tools to good use. So thank you again.
Oh, Disha, thanks for the opportunity. This was fun.
Thank you, Rikki. Your story is a powerful reminder of how important it is to really vet the financial advice that we're getting. And it's also a reminder that it's never too late to take control of our financial futures and turn our financial lives around. And for our listeners, if you're just starting out or feeling a little lost, don't hesitate to seek help, but always ask the right questions and understand how your advisor is getting paid. That's all for today's episode of Finding Financial Freedom with the Frugal Physician. Thank you again, Dr. Rikki Racela, for sharing your experience with us. Until next time, keep working towards your financial independence. Stay frugal, y'all.
The content shared on this podcast should not be taken as individualized financial advice. We are here to share our knowledge and experiences, but it is crucial to consult with professionals such as accountants, financial advisors, or attorneys who can provide personalized guidance based on your specific needs.